Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So I want to go ahead and do one of our Friday afternoon college hoops recruiting updates. And it's kind of funny, right? So I know I've said it the last couple weeks, but I know most of us are focused on college football. But while the world is focused on college football, what's happening on Saturdays? In college hoops, it's quietly a very busy time in recruiting. As I've told you the last couple weeks, your favorite coach is on the road, in gyms, evaluating high school players, getting kids on campus to visit. And it feels like the last couple weeks, we've had a bunch of kids narrow lists, take visits, set commitment dates. And so we've been doing these high school recruiting roundup updates because they are things that I think you guys and girls really like and have really enjoyed. And so I want to do another one because it does feel like as we end September, there's a lot of news. It's coming fast. It's coming furious. It involves a lot of the biggest names and brands in college basketball. So let's go ahead and dive in. And it is worth noting, we're like, 5 weeks away from the actual college hoop season. So as we get deeper in October, we will be doing more actual college hoops content leading up to that November 4th, 5th, whatever it is, actual start date to the season. Cannot wait. But the focus today is recruiting. So first big piece of news. It's funny. We did one of these recruiting updates on Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. And of course, the second that I hit publish on that, we got late breaking news. This was now a few days ago. But that Darius Adams, a 5-star guard, 6'5", originally from New Jersey, now plays at La Lumiere High School out in Indiana, that he had set his commitment date, okay? So this is about a top 25 or so prospect, a player that plans to commit here. He actually did set his commitment date for this coming Monday, September 30th, so it's coming fast and furious. First of all, in terms of the player, I see him as kind of a combo hybrid guard, on the ball, off the ball, can handle, can run your offense, can play off the ball as well. But 6'5" still will grow into his frame. I mean, he's one of these kids that when you see him, you can just see that NBA size and length. And it's really just about kind of filling out and kind of developing from there. But all of the, the natural God-given gifts are there. And obviously a heck of a player as well that, as I said, can play on and off the ball. Bring it up because he has cut his list down to 3. Michigan State, Tennessee, and UConn. As I said, he is set to commit on Monday. Now, I'll tell you right now, it does feel to me like early on this can change in 48 hours because it always does in recruiting. It does feel like to me that Darius Adams is going to be a UConn Husky. Okay, not saying it is a UConn homer. I'm just telling you that's where the intel is. That's where the buzz is, etc. First of all, Northeast kid from Jersey originally, like I said. And listen, I think he has that flair, that toughness that you need to play at UConn, that you need to play for Dan Hurley. I would add this. You know who his game kind of reminds me of? Actually, Tristan Newton, who played at UConn the last 2 years, part of back-to-back national championships. Now, Tristan Newton was a graduate or a transfer who graduated, started at East Carolina. He's from El Paso. Forgive me. Got my my El Paso connections mixed up there. But he reminds me of Tristan Newton, okay? And so I think there is a comp there. I think there is what's the word I'm looking for, the phrase I'm looking for? Proof of concept, I guess, would be the right verbiage there. Basically, Dan Hurley has proven I can take a player just like you, turn you into an NBA player. Again, Tristan Newton was a 5th-year college player. It's a little bit different than a high school basketball player. But this, to me, feels like the perfect Northeast tough UConn guard. Will say a couple things from the UConn perspective, and we'll dive into this a little bit more if this kid does commit on Monday to the UConn Huskies. But, from the UConn perspective, I would just say UConn is finalizing its board. I do think that if they do take Darius Adams, do think it would probably eliminate them from 5-star point guard Malik Thomas. Malik Thomas is kind of the same kind of player, can play on the ball, can play off the ball, 6'4", same kind of frame. Think it was kind of one or the other. Early on, UConn led. They had him on campus. They thought they were going to get a commit over the summer. When it didn't happen, I think they kind of moved on to Darius Adams. So Malik Thomas, who we're going to talk about in a minute because he has an important visit, to me, this feels like it would all but eliminate Malik Thomas. Don't think, however, it would eliminate Braylon Mullins, a player that we talked about 2-3 days ago, 6'4" shooter from the state of Indiana. He cut his list down to 3, Indiana, UConn, and North Carolina. He'll make his decision whenever, but think UConn would take both if they can get both. And as I told you on the episode a few days ago, do think that in that top 3, it feels like a UConn versus the home state school of Indiana on Braylon Mullins. Let's keep it going because I just mentioned Malik Thomas. Malik Thomas is a dynamic guard, and I'll tell you this, he is part of the most dynamic recruiting weekend that we have in college hoops this weekend because Alabama, they are hosting what they are calling the biggest biggest basketball recruiting weekend in the history of the program. Don't think it's a coincidence. They're getting all the big recruits on campus for the Georgia football game. So while Kalen DeBoer and all them are going to have, all sorts of talent from the football perspective, from the basketball perspective, Nate Oates he's not letting a good opportunity go to waste here either. Who does Nate Oates, Preston Murphy, that staff have on campus? How about this? Number 1 high school player in America, AJ DeBonsa. 5-star guard Malik Thomas, 5-star guard Braden Burries. And then I also was told, I saw this, Caleb Holt, a top 5 player in the class of 2026, a little early to start talking about him. He plans on being on campus as well. So you could be talking about 3 5-star players in the class of 25, a 5-star in the class of 26. Again, don't let a good opportunity go to waste. Nate Oates appears like he is not. Now, in terms of these 3 players, Braden Burries, really interesting player. Just a very quiet recruitment. West Coast kid, is in California. I remember when we did our, over the summer, we did our, where do we project every 5-star to commit to? We did that video probably in late July or something. He was one of the ones that it was just like, there's really no telling where this kid is going to land. 6'4". Again, I know I kind of mentioned it with Darius Adams, but the type of player that can play on the ball, that can play off the ball. I think he's probably best with the ball in his hands, but he's from California, and it's crazy because he's one that there's just no real indication as to where he's actually going and what his plans are in terms of college basketball. Took a visit to Arizona over the summer. If I had to guess, it's total speculation, but Arizona's probably a leader. But other than that, not a lot in his recruitment so far. But Braden Burries has a chance to see Alabama up close. Malik Thomas has a chance to see Alabama up close. And Malik Thomas, as I said a minute ago, over the summer, felt like was a strong UConn lean. He was the player that famously at the time said when Dan Hurley interviewed for the Lakers job, whatever. That just makes me want to play for Dan Hurley more. Love his style, love whatever. But I bring it up because as time has gone on, Malik Thomas's recruitment has gone in a different direction. I think he's all but eliminated UConn at this point. Now, what I will say, he is just really starting to ramp up his visits. He is down to 7 schools, really 6 without UConn. He's originally from Pittsburgh. But to me, this feels like right now, at least as of maybe a few weeks ago, Arkansas and a Kansas State recruitment. Both those schools were in deep on him. And so Alabama, I think, has a little bit of ground to make up, but Alabama also has a lot to sell. Coming off a Final Four, I believe they are the preseason number 1 team in college basketball. And Nate Oates has that pro style, that pro system that, oh, by the way, is now, not only producing pros, but it's also worth noting is winning at the highest level of college basketball as well. One thing that's worth noting on Malik Thomas is, there's been a lot of buzz about NIL with him. We know Arkansas is in great shape with NIL. We know Kansas State is in great shape with NIL. Not to say that Alabama is not in great shape, but they don't appear to be one of these schools that's just willing to give you whatever you want. So if it does come down to an NIL, are they still a factor? We will see. By the way, Malik Thomas is scheduled to visit Arkansas next week, so his kind of recruiting cycle is really just starting to ramp up. Let's keep it going. Oh, by the way, should mention AJ DeBonsa. You're just going to skip over the number 1 player in America. What's wrong with me, Torres? Give myself a little slap on the face, slap on the wrist. But AJ DeBonsa, listen, we've talked about him. a million times. This kid is special. Number one high school player in America, elite of the elite. We've done 37 different videos on him over the course of the summer, but the kid is just so special. 6'8", can create for others, can shoot, defends. What I love about him, he plays his absolute butt off every time he steps on the floor. There are times where kids, number one ranking based on skill or based on projection or based on whatever, they don't always show it every time they play. This kid does. He is talented. He is special. But his recruitment is really just starting to get going. And we've talked about AJ DeBonsa, but his list is down to 7, has taken visits the last 3 weekends to Kansas State, Kansas, and North Carolina, has previously visited Auburn, Alabama this week, that's 5, still has Baylor and BYU. Obviously, we know NIL is going to be a factor that has been openly discussed by his camp. But as I've said, I don't believe that as of this second, there is a leader for AJ DeBonsa, because remember, he has said this and his family has said it. He really had no real communication with any of these coaching staffs until the visit process began. And so really he was letting his dad handle the recruiting stuff. His dad kind of cut down the list. And then when they got down to 7, that was when he really began the relationship with the coaching staffs. So I know there's speculation. Is BYU a leader? Is Baylor in the mix? Is whatever? I think we're in the early stages with AJ DeBonsa. We'll see, but he is at Alabama this weekend. Other storylines from the weekend, and let's head now to another SEC school and a place and a coach that I was told was not going to be able to recruit at the highest levels of college basketball. It's amazing what a difference a few months can make. I am, of course, talking about Lexington, Kentucky, the Kentucky Wildcats, and Mark Pope. When Mark Pope was hired, we all heard the storylines. Now, listen, I was critical of certain elements of the hire, but I always believed if and when he got the job, he would be able to recruit. Well, since then, guess what has happened? 5-star Jasper Johnson, committed. Malachi Moreno, elite big man, committed. A couple weeks ago, you had 5-star Caleb Wilson on campus. Last weekend, you had a Caden Lewis 4-star guard on campus. And this weekend, the big names do not stop, as not one, but 2 more 5-stars are headed to Lexington. Let's go ahead and dive in. First one, really talented player that I really enjoy watching. That's Chris Sinak Jr., okay? Big guy, originally from New Orleans. He now plays at Link Academy out in Missouri, but 6'10", really skilled, and really an interesting story. I know I just mentioned it, but a year ago was largely off most people's radars. Then over the course of probably about the last 5 or 6 months, dating back to April, the beginning of the spring recruiting periods, this kid just absolutely blew up. MVP of the MBPA Top 100 camp down in Orlando. Every coach in America attends that event. Part of that Team USA U17 gold medal team that destroyed everybody with AJ DeBonsa, Cam Boozer. You go on and on down the list. Caleb Holt was on that team. Jalen Harrelson, who we'll talk about in a minute, was on that team as well. But this kid has seen his recruitment blow up here probably over the last, probably 3-4 months or so. In terms of his recruitment, by the way, 6'11", rim runner, athletic. I mean, he just has NBA talent oozing out of his bones. But in terms of his recruitment, he's one that transparently, because he blew up so late in the process, it is hard to know really like who is there a favorite? What does that list actually look like? He's visited Auburn. He's visited Tennessee. He's visited Houston. The hometown LSU Tigers will get a visit. And so this weekend he's headed to Lexington. Listen, transparently, I don't know how would he potentially fit in with Malachi Moreno. He can stretch the floor. Can you play both of them? I don't know. But clearly, if Mark Pope is bringing him to campus, he believes in him. He believes in his talent. So Chris Sinak Jr., the first of 2 5-stars in Lexington. The other one, another just fascinating name, a fascinating recruitment. The player is named Michael Brown Jr., another 5-star, another player that is on campus in Lexington this week. Lefty guard, 6'4", playmaker. It's funny. We talked about Caden Lewis a week ago, lead guard. This kid is a lead guard, and it is kind of funny, right? I think we might have talked about this either earlier in this segment or earlier in the week. But you look at a player like Braylon Mullins getting, cutting Kentucky from his list a few weeks ago. It was simply a matter of, do Braylon Mullins and Jasper Johnson fit together? I'm sure Mark Pope would have found a way if Braylon Mullins wanted to go, but ultimately he decides to cut Kentucky from the list. I bring it up because whether it's a Caden Lewis or Michael Brown Jr., who is on campus this week, these guys are more traditional lead guards, point guard, ball in your hand, and those two actually would complement Jasper Johnson, the five-star that is already committed, very nicely. In terms of Michael Brown Jr., fascinating recruitment because thought Ole Miss did a good job early on in his recruitment, prioritizing him. It felt like they were favored. Even on 24/7, there is a crystal ball right now this second for Michael Brown. But over the last couple of weeks, it just feels like he has become so much more of a national recruit. Did visit Indiana at some point in this spring. There's been a lot of Louisville buzz over the last couple weeks. And so this is a player that, again, it kind of feels like thought the recruitment was going one way. It is now kind of picked up expeditiously. It just feels like it's full speed ahead. The best programs in America want Michael Brown Jr. So the fact that these two are on campus in Lexington just shows you how prioritized they are. And how well, frankly, that Mark Stoops, not Mark Stoops, he's on the football side, Mark Pope is doing with this 2025 class. Hope and Pope, baby. Hope and Pope. By the way, we got our Hope and Pope t-shirts at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Couple other notes from the weekend. Another player, fast rising, that I have talked about a little bit on this channel, Nate Amen, big, kind of a 6'9", 6'10" kid, but very much a player that is a stretch 5, stretch 4, can hit threes, whatever. And he's a guy, listen, you talk to people in basketball, they'll tell you, AJ DeBonsa, Cam Boozer, you pick who you want at the top. Those two are special. But you talk about a dude that is just now starting to scratch the surface of his potential and could be the best pro out of all these kids down the road. Nate Amen is that guy. Another player that, because of how late his recruitment blew up, feels like he is just now starting to really enjoy the fruits of that recruitment. He is visiting Texas this weekend. That's why I do bring him up. He's a Virginia kid, kind of feels like maybe a Duke thing, maybe a Virginia thing, but but again, national recruit that I think was really thinking locally 4 or 5 months ago. Now he's like, I could pretty much go anywhere in the country. So we will see Nate Amen. He is at Texas this weekend. We will see what goes on with that recruitment. And then finally, a name that I mentioned a few minutes ago, just want to give a very, very quick shout out to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish basketball program. Okay. Micah Shrewsbury was at Penn State. He is now there going into year 2. He has had as good of a recruiting week as Notre Dame basketball has had in the recruiting rankings era. Can't speak to what Digger Phelps did 50 years ago. But this week, Jalen Harrelson, 6'6" wing, originally from the state of Indiana, plays at La Lumiere High School with Darius Adams, who we talked about to lead this segment. Jalen Harrelson committed to Indiana, committed to Notre Dame. It came down to Indiana, Michigan, and Penn State, but he is ultimately a member of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. This one's huge. First of all, highest ranked recruit in the history of Notre Dame recruiting in this recruiting rankings era. And two, you think about some of those teams that you beat back. Indiana, Michigan State, Purdue, a visit to Purdue was canceled late. A couple SEC schools tried to get in there. It speaks to Micah Shrewsbury, really bright up-and-coming coach that everybody in basketball circles respects. Remember, a few years ago, he got Penn State to the NCAA tournament, took the Notre Dame job, and I think he's going to be really good. I would add, too, I think it's kind of an important recruit for the ACC. The ACC, listen, the last couple of years, it has really been Duke, Carolina, and then a major drop-off after that. I remember talking about Louisville over the summer, said Louisville needs to be good because everybody after Duke and Carolina has kind of been a disaster. By the way, got a text from somebody in the league that was not happy that I said that, but I'm not going to pull back and deny what I said because I truly believe what I meant, truly believe what I said. So Notre Dame not only adds Jalen Harrelson, should mention, I said it's the biggest week in Notre Dame history in this rankings era. Brady Kohler, a forward that is also from the state of Indiana, committed earlier this week. So you got two top about 100 recruits in the country, but Jalen Harrelson is the headliner there. All right. I just gave you about 20 good minutes of recruiting content here on a Friday afternoon in September. It is football season, so I'm going to go back and sit back and enjoy the rest of my Friday. But there are some recruiting news and notes as we get into a busy week in college hoops recruiting. Make sure that you're subscribed. We just crossed 44,000 subscribers. And as I said to lead the show, a lot more college hoops recruiting content, but college hoops regular content coming because the season